Hey, what's up everybody? It's Joe, and it is that time of month. It's actually later than that time of month for the monthly Patreon Q&A and channel update. The holidays are about to get into full swing. I just had my birthday a few days ago. Things are going. I'm actually wrapping up production on the Mega Man episode, which if you're a Patreon, you probably have already watched. And if you are, well, maybe not. And if you're watching this on the channel, you're probably about to be able to see it. It's going up on the day of Mega Man's 30th anniversary, December 17th. So, a couple things, just year-end stuff. I'm going to be doing, and I cribbed this from Kim Justice, I'm going to be doing a poll once the Mega Man video is up. It's going to ask what your favorite video of mine was this year. And then that'll be part of the January channel update Q&A stuff. I'll talk a little bit about that. So I really hope once I put that up, and I'll tweet it out and I'll put it on Patreon and all that stuff, I hope that people respond to that. I'll probably make another video just sort of calling it out with a link in the description. So I hope you all participate in that. Also, I have decided that the among some possible other changes, but I've decided that the Open Holes Productions, which maybe if you've been watching for a long time, you don't even notice anymore, but that name it's time to go. It's just, the optics have never been correct on that. People seem to take the wrong implications. The reasoning behind the Open Holes Productions, which even used to be the name of the YouTube channel before it sort of integrated with On the Stick, and then I just changed the name to On the Stick. But they were kind of separate at the beginning, and there's not really a reason for that anymore, especially since so much stuff from On the Stick, and it's like, you know, every episode it's like On the Stick presents an Open Holes production, and now I think it's probably just going to say like an On the Stick production, because it's not, you know, whatever. So that's going away, but originally there was a sign on a fence near where I lived in Milwaukee, but it said "Danger Open Holes," and it had like a picture of a stick figure falling into like an Acme portable hole, like a perfectly circular hole, and it was going to be the production company logo, and I never used that, so a lot of people never got the joke, and so they went with sort of a pornographic implication. But to me it was this hilarious image of this guy just falling into a hole, and it's also sort of, it calls to mind, in my mind, the Mel Brooks quote, which is, tragedy is when I cut my finger, comedy is when you fall into an open sewer and die. So the open holes, open sewer thing is was sort of, which also goes into the original purpose of the channel. If you go all the way back to the first thing that was ever posted on this channel, it was a comedy sketch, which was the original plan, was to do comedy sketches, and we did one and never did any more after that. So it's just, it's time to go. Again, a lot of people probably don't even notice it anymore because it's only at the very beginning. You know, but it's not like a brand that has the penetration of something like Cinemassacre, for example, or, you know, anything like that. So it's just time to be retired. There are some other changes I'm sort of mulling as far as end screen stuff and you know, that kind of thing. I kind of like the rolling credits with the end screen bits, and, you know, running a classic commercial is what I usually try to do under that stuff, but that might change. We'll see. If you have thoughts on that, please feel free to leave a comment. But other than that, yeah, it's holiday time. I'm actually really glad to be done with this video. This Mega Man video that I'm just wrapping up production on. Like I said, I'm really, it's going to be done tonight, as of this recording, which it's Tuesday the 12th when I'm recording this. So it's going to be done tonight, which leaves me the rest of the month to just sort of not stress. I'll be back in January, but yeah, we're going to be doing some stuff. The Christmas gift exchange videos, live streams are going to be going into January, which is, you know, started as a podcast. We used to all exchange gifts and then we would talk about them on one episode of the podcast. And once we started really doing the streams more often than the podcast, to the point now where we just do the streams, last year we started just saying, we're just going to play the game for an hour every week. We'll play one of the gifted games for an hour every week, around Christmas time. And so that's what we're doing this year. So you can check those out. I got a PlayStation 2 game from Kurt, and I gave a PlayStation 2 game to Eric. So we'll be playing those in the coming weeks. And I'm just looking forward to Christmas. I'm taking some time off of work, and it's just going to be chill. So yeah, that's about it for the channel update. We'll move on to the Patreon Q&A. So I guess everybody's busy for the holidays because only one person left any questions. But if there are things that you've been wondering about, maybe you'll get some enlightenment out of this. So it was Joel, and Joel asks, what are your attitudes to covering remakes? You covered the Ninja Gaiden Trilogy remake on Super NES, but not Twin Snakes for the GameCube. So I wonder if there are requirements at hand. Yes, the requirement is that it have the same name. I really do try to stick to that as much as possible. The only exceptions that I have really ever made on the same name rule are for imports, where I feel that you could reasonably infer that, if this game had gotten a US release, it would have been called the same thing. So like Super Dodgeball is one where, it was Super Dodgeball in the US, and on the PC Engine it was Neketsu Koko Dodgeball Boo PC Bangai Hen. But I am fairly confident that if they had released it in North America, it would have just been called Super Dodgeball. I could be wrong about that, we'll never know, but I think you can reasonably make that inference. But when it's something like Metal Gear Solid versus Metal Gear Solid The Twin Snakes, they don't have the same name anymore. But in the case of Ninja Gaiden, yes, the cartridge is called Ninja Gaiden Trilogy, but that game is just one part of the trilogy, and it is still called Ninja Gaiden on the trilogy version. So that's sort of the thing with remakes. If so something like Devil May Cry, even though people refer to the remake as DMC Devil May Cry, that's not actually the title, it's just Devil May Cry. And I think people call it that to differentiate from the original Devil May Cry. So that's one that I might do someday. Those are pretty long games, and but I did like the remake a lot, and I do like the original. So there's a chance I get to those eventually. So stuff like that. But anything that is like DuckTales remastered, not going to do it. So that's the reasoning behind that. Let's see. Making a show about 5 exclusive games for older consoles, an interesting subject, but also a bit narrow as there's only so many gaming consoles. Do you have a lot of ideas for future episodes in mind? Yeah, actually, I do. If you look behind me here, you can sort of see that I have a pretty fair number of systems supported back here. I own something like 20 some different consoles last time I checked. And in the modern era, exclusives are more and more rare, but yeah, I mean, that show can keep going for a while. And there are systems that I plan to buy in the future, that will provide more fodder for those. In fact, I could do a couple episodes just on the Virtual Boy, because basically every title on it is an exclusive. I don't currently have a Virtual Boy though. And there are multiple, like I just did a Master System one. We're going to be doing another one of those, because people have already just mentioned like a ton of other Master System games, which I thought so many of them went to the Game Gear that there wouldn't be that many, but there are a lot of exclusive Master System games. So that show isn't going anywhere anytime soon. It says, I really dug the Super Double Dragon episode. Will we see any other regional comparisons? Yes, absolutely. I love regional comparisons. Those are some of my favorite episodes to do. If you have not seen Super Double Dragon, I'm trying to think, Super Double Dragon, Ninja Gaiden 3, Castlevania 3, technically Super Mario Bros. 2, although that's like a little different, is a regional differences episode. Those are same system, regional differences. Star Wars is also technically a regional differences episode, but yeah, so I love doing those, and there are absolutely a couple that I have in mind. I'm sort of thinking about doing another NES series in 2020. I might do another NES series. That's years away from now, but there are even more NES games that have some pretty significant regional changes. And there are Super Nintendo games. There are games that have that. So yes, absolutely. I'm glad you like those episodes because I love doing them. And I definitely do plan on doing more. And the last question is, any interesting arcade experiences / memories? How about a game you wish had been ported to a system but never was? So when you're talking about the arcade, I definitely am not going to spend like 20 minutes telling you old arcade stories, even though I could. So for me, I just turned 35, and so the arcade was not only alive and well when I was a kid, but was in its like second golden age when I was like 10. And I lived in the suburbs, in a pretty safe suburb, and so once I turned about 12, I think it was when I turned 12, my parents started letting me go to the mall that was about 3 blocks from our house by myself. And there was an arcade, a Timeout, which was originally Sega's Timeout. It was back when game publishers owned arcade chains. First it was Sega's Timeout, then Namco bought all the Timeouts, and it was basically an Aladdin's Castle because Namco had also purchased Aladdin's Castle before that. And even when I was younger, they would let me go into so I grew up in a town that had a sort of a village center type of like a town square, like a little town square. It was a suburb of a major city, but we were kind of far enough out that we had that. And in the little town square, there was a malt shop, believe it or not, in the 90s. It's still there, actually, but they got rid of the video games. But they did used to have a bunch of video games. And when I was younger than 12, before I could go to the mall by myself, I was allowed to walk down to the village and go to the malt shop and the video store. The video store where I rented a lot of my games. Whenever I tell rental stories, there's a place called Village Video, and I showed a t-shirt in, I think it was Ninja Gaiden 3 episode. I showed a t-shirt that I still have with the Village Video logo on it. They had arcade games. So I could go down there, and the pizza parlor had arcade games, and it's just like, it's kind of weird now, and now you're seeing it kind of creep up again, but at that time when the arcade was booming, there were arcade machines everywhere. Laundromats, malt shops, pizza parlors, video stores, arcade games were all over the place. So I played a lot of arcade games, and I could fill a whole podcast and then some with memories from the arcades. But I mean, stuff like the first time I saw Street Fighter 2 was at a bowling alley arcade. My dad used to bowl in a league on Friday nights, and he would take me with. And this bowling alley, Olympic Lanes on 27th Street in Milwaukee, which is no longer called Olympic Lanes and no longer has a super amazing arcade, but they had, I mean, again, to sort of impart how it was in those days, this bowling alley had an arcade that was the same size as the mall arcade in the shopping mall where it was like, I mean, you could go there and not bowl a single game and just play video games, which is what I did. My dad would bowl with his team, and he'd give me a roll of quarters, and I would play video games while he bowled. And I guess I just gave my mom some time to relax or whatever back at home. And the first time I played Street Fighter 2, I was playing something else, and I think it was... what was the name of that? There was an SNK game. It's not Street Smart. Street Smart, I think it was. It was like Pit Fighter, but not as ugly. But it was the same as like one-on-one fighting, but with like a false perspective 3D thing. There's a Genesis port. I think it's called Street Smart. I was playing that, and I turned around and like, bam, Street Fighter 2. Now, I was one of the few people, I think, who at one of the places in the village center where I grew up, they had, one of the places had a Street Fighter 1 machine, and I played a lot of Street Fighter 1, and usually, even when I got pretty good at it, I would get just destroyed by Adon typically. I think I made it to Sagat like one time, as a kid. And Street Fighter 1 kind of sucks if you go back to it, but I liked it at the time and I was into it. So when I saw Street Fighter 2, I was like, what? You know, and the first time I played Street Fighter 2, I continued off somebody else's game and they were at M. Bison. And since it was my first time playing, I did not know that he was the final boss, and I kept wondering why I was getting beat up so badly. Also, I thought Blanca was awesome because he was a monster, and monsters were sweet, because I was like, yeah, 10 years old, 91, 9 years old when that game came out in the arcade. So that's one. First time I saw Mortal Kombat, I didn't believe my friend. My friend who lived across the street was a couple years older than me, came over, or we were playing outside or whatever, and he was like, man, they got this game at the arcade in the mall, and it's like Street Fighter, but you can like rip people's heads off. And I was like, get out of town, man, I don't believe that. But then when we went to the mall and saw it, and there was like a huge crowd of people around this game, right? Like the first time I saw Street Fighter 2, like it was in this giant arcade, and nobody was, like one guy was playing and then he left, and then I picked up his game at M. Bison and got, you know, mollywopped over and over and over again. But man, we saw Mortal Kombat at the mall arcade. There was a crowd. I mean, you wouldn't believe it nowadays if you didn't live through it then, to say, yeah, there was a crowd of people, like 6 people deep around this Mortal Kombat machine. But there definitely was. And I was like, it's so short, you know, as a little kid trying to like see over people's arms and see like Johnny Cage like punch a dude's head off, and I was just like, what? So those are, I mean, again, I've got a ton more arcade stories. Once I got old enough, you know, when I was 16, there was a Sega GameWorks in Chicago. I believe the GameWorks is still there. GameWorks, by the way, it's like no question, GameWorks is so much better than Dave & Buster's. If you're into that debate, GameWorks is way better. But we would go, you know, at 16, I was 16. I turned 16 in 1998. So arcades were kind of on the way out, but not yet. So, yeah, that was the thing. And then he asked about any games that I wish had been ported. There are 2 very quickly that I'm just going to mention. A game called Osman, also known as Cannon Dancer, which is like a spiritual sequel to Strider, not by Capcom, but by the guy who designed the original Strider for Capcom. That game has never been ported from the arcade. And the Cliffhanger Edward Randy, which I understand is a Data East game. It's it's Indiana Jones, and it's just full of these bizarre set pieces. It's really cool. It's really fun. But it was doing very, very tricky scaling and rotation and showy offy stuff in the arcade, which is why it never got ported. But I would have liked to see someone try to do that. So those would be my 2 never ported out of the arcade games, since that was sort of the same question as arcade memories, arcade games that didn't get ported. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your support. If you are watching this on Patreon, if you're watching it on YouTube, you can contribute if you like. I totally get it if you know, it's fine. But you can get cool stuff. The ability to ask me questions in this venue, and you can request specific games and stuff like that. And yeah. Thanks for watching. See you later.